Joining me now, retired Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, who is Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Good to see you today. Thank you for being with me. First of all, I'm looking at a report right now, and it's listing U.S. officials are telling Fox News the ceasefire is largely holding. And we just heard from the Defense Secretary talking about the Turks put us in a terrible position. Where are we right now in this, and what do you think will happen next?
Well, we're not in the worst place we could be. Look, the Turks have wanted to do this for a long time. I disagree with the senator. We didn't give the Turks anything. They were always going to do this at some point. In some ways, we're a victim of our own success because we did such a good job of taking down the caliphate that basically all the parties in the region have gone back to squabbling over the Syrian civil war like they did before we intervened. What the ceasefire did accomplish is it did mitigate human suffering. Even an imperfect ceasefire allowed the time for the YPG to retrograde, allowed the time for refugees to move if they needed to. So it's not a bad situation. But I think where we are from going forward is Turkey still has to be held accountable. Whatever they do in that region, if there are militias running around that are killing people and doing extrajudicial killings, Turkey's responsible for controlling that. If there are terrorists running around, Turkey's responsible for apprehending them. If there are individuals at risk, Turkey's responsible for that. So the sanctions may be off for now, but I think the U.S. has to be ready to go back to punish Turkey if it doesn't meet its obligations.
Colonel Carafano, I'm just curious, are we in a position to best witness all of that? And I'm reading a report now that the Pentagon is looking at sending tanks to Syria for the first time, according to U.S. officials. Do we have enough presence right there next to where we just exited to be able to witness some of what you're talking about, to hold them accountable?
So there are reports, and again, I have access to the same information, not in the Pentagon. There are reports that the U.S. is looking at keeping some U.S. forces in that region. We're continuing to work with the SDF and the YPG on ISIS, but also a presence of some U.S. forces on the ground to look at what's going on. That would be incredibly helpful. What's going to be more important, though, is after Turkey sets up this buffer zone, is the United States and other international actors getting access so they can go in, because a lot of this is done forensically after the fact, interviewing people.
I mean, they're working with the Turks now in that buffer zone you're talking about. I mean, it's going to be them and Russia.
Well, but the buffer zone is going to be controlled by Turkey. Turkey is the responsible party. And there have also been discussions about bringing in Europeans and other monitors, which I think would be quite helpful. But again, if Turkey doesn't allow access to the zone and it doesn't allow people to investigate cases and talk to people, then that I think will come back and diminish Turkey's reputation. And it could trigger a reimplementation of sanctions.
Colonel, real quickly, General Mazloum is somebody that the president mentioned quite a few times yesterday, and you heard about that bipartisan push for a sped-up visa through the Secretary of State Pompeo to get that general here. Why is it important to bring him here?
Well, look, I'm all for transparency. I mean, I think that all the actors involved should explain their perspective and what they view. I think that's important. I think it's important for the administration.
Do we need to show the SDF that we support them?
Well, ironically, I think as much as people have said, well, we've abandoned them, well, we brokered a ceasefire. We're talking about leaving observers there. We're continuing to work with them on counterterrorism missions. We continue to have link with them, and we've negotiated a permanent ceasefire. These are all things that are actually good for the SDF. And so I think the notion that somehow we've abandoned them is wrong. And I do think that actually having them come here and showing that there's continued connection. But again, we also have to remember that these aren't choir boys here. These groups have had links to the PKK, which is a terrorist group which has attacked Turkey in the past. And we have to hold them accountable for their actions, just like we hold Turkey accountable for theirs.